Luis, look, we've already got practically 3 hours of podcast here. We could do another 3 hours of podcast, but it's not feasible.
Got it.
So we're heading towards the final stretch here. So I wanted to ask you a question, which is the following. I couldn't ask all the questions I wanted that we had set aside here, but the conversation was so nice, man. It was flowing in such a way, so natural, right, that we even forget a little bit here. The script, but there's two questions that I can't leave unasked. The first is, during all this time working there as a luthier, taking instruments for repair to work on, tell me about an instrument that surprised you and one that completely disappointed you. You said, wow, man, I got that guitar, or that guitar from that brand. What a disappointment. And one you got and said, I didn't expect much. But why? What a well-built, nice instrument.
Let's see. There are many.
Pick the one that stood out to you the most. The one that caught your eye, like I expected a bit more from this one.
What disappointed me? I think the Fender guitars disappointed me so much in terms of construction, sound, finish. Maybe not, but the sound and tuning and the issue of some that came with design flaws, it disappointed me a bit. I must say, it's not exclusive to the brand. There have been several, but because of the Fender name, right? It came along with my entire childhood, that thing of, wow, the dream of having a Fender. But we always thought about the guitar. So the guitars, I have nothing to say. They are wonderful. I think they're really cool. But the Fender acoustic guitars I found, quite disappointing. And what surprised me? Let's say what surprised me the most.
It could be from a recent work you did, an instrument you picked up and said, wow, this here, man, people talk so much about this brand that it's so-so, but hey, the design is there, it's well made, nice to play, it's really cool. It would be something along those lines.
I was surprised by the little guitars. They're from a Luthier. I picked them up, 2 or 3 appeared in these recent periods. There, right, it's a Luthier, I think from... I might be talking nonsense, man, because I really don't remember. But I think it's Ledur.
Ledur, I know.
Ledur?
I know Ledur.
The little guitars, right?
Uh-huh.
Smaller ones, like with a short scale.
Like 3/4, right?
And such. And I found his construction cool, the way he put some bridges, right, with the saddles. I thought the guitar was nice. And I even had to make there was even one break, right? I had to make half of a new neck. On one of these guitars, because they broke it so badly, they broke it at the truss rod part. It was an accident involving a girl who owned the guitar, right? So I had to rebuild the neck and I made a new headstock. I copied the shape, put it on just the same. It turned out exactly the same. Cool. I revived it because that's actually one of the concerns, right? When you refurbish, right? Refurbishing is different from restoring, right? So we have to be concerned with making something very close to reality, which is the original instrument. Yes, to avoid altering its character. So the main concern is this, especially with the old instruments I work on. Like a guitar from 1904 that showed up, which belongs to the Dear Zepadilla.
Yes, you mentioned that.
It's a Janine from 1904, which I refurbished for the producer of Elite Squad and several other cinema hits, Jose Padilla. And this guitar, I think it was one of the oldest. I think it was the oldest I've ever worked on there. It's on the list of my oldest ones like that. It was a really cool job to do, just like I've worked on other guitars that he buys and sends to me to adjust, right? But this one is the one I remember as being the oldest. And it was a really nice restoration. The restoration of the guitar also, which really marked me. Nelson Faria's guitar, his first guitar ever.
Wow, that's a responsibility, right?
It was a guitar whose neck was completely shattered. And I took it there and restored it. I reinforced it, but I was careful to remove the skin there, the front part of the headstock, put it back in place, and give it a somewhat aged finish. So it would have that more, guitar-like look.
Yes. Like, you didn't want to make it look like a newly made guitar, right? Like you just left the store.
Exactly.
You wanted to maintain its vintage guitar style, right? It had its years of use, but it should still be playable.
That's it. And safe, right? It has to be safe. You have to do all this with safety in mind.
Cool. Really cool. The last thing I wanted to ask you is you brought a device that's over there. We're going to show it that you use to test the tops of the guitars, right? You build the tops of the guitars, and as you said, the top is the most important part of the guitar. And you have a device there that we're going to show to the audience on how you achieve this standard for the top.
Actually, this is really just the first step of a long process.
Of course, of course. Sure, it's not just that.
That's right. It's the first step of a process we do. This is to define some properties of the wood, to determine the quality test of the wood. Because when we buy wood, let's say, from suppliers, and it doesn't matter if they are national suppliers or suppliers from abroad, it's common in the market to have the classification of the woods. Oh, this one is a top A. This one is a top AA.
Ah, yes, well, yeah. I see this a lot with. Usually, when we have figured tops like flamed maple, quilted maple, you have this grading, right? Of right.
That's right. Exactly.
And so on.
It doesn't matter, okay? You'll have 10A in the wood that I'm going to test, okay? I see. Why is that? Because I've come across so many things. C. That sounded better than A. Wow. I've come across so many B things that sounded better than triple A. Wow. So, thanks to the test, right? Why? Why is that? Because, you know, right? Suppliers primarily care, right? About the beauty of the wood. It's the most important aspect there, right? That you are seeing. Yes. And some suppliers, right? I'm not generalizing, but some suppliers do the tape tone test and even write their bass, nice sound, etc., etc. They put some note on the wood that you see like this, right? People with more experience, right? Like Oscar, for example, from Strings. When I buy from him, he writes there, bass, good bass, I don't know what else. He's already done it already. He's already done the tape tone. Yes. But when I play there, sometimes I see a reversed version of this. When I test it, this one here, which theoretically should be of higher quality than the other, doesn't have better quality than the other. And I see this even people from outside who do similar tests to mine, it's a consensus. They also do tests similar to mine and have the same idea. And I'm about to release a video on this actually.
Do it.
Which we'll talk about. Look, I'll take this one here, it's AA, this one is A, and so on. And I'll do the test and say, look, these were the test results and so on.
Interesting.
That way you demystify this thing that what's written there, right? If the quality isn't linked to beauty.
I agree with you. Wow. 1,000%, because I understand, and I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, guys, please forgive me. Put it in the comments that I'm wrong. This grading, which is given to flamed maple, AD, all that stuff, is related to how figured it is, and not necessarily this figuring is not necessarily related to the quality of sound you will get. It's just that the flaming becomes much more evident. When you finish it, you dye the wood, the quilted. I see it this way, that this grading is about how evident that flame, that quilted, is on the wood. And not necessarily that it will sound better than a wood, as you said, like grade C.
Yeah, but the Q-tip usually, its main application is for guitar tops.
Yeah, guitar tops, exactly.
Which won't make a difference.
Yeah, it's just to look nice.
Let's stir up that controversy, right? Wood doesn't influence the tone. Ha 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 ha. On the guitar. So, now, talking about acoustics, right? That's the soul of the acoustic, right? The top there. Ah, perfect. So, we're talking about spruce, Canadian cedar, woods that we use for the top. And the truth is that we can also do these tests on the back and sides too. Interesting. But I focus on the tests of the top and back. On the sides, I don't do it. Okay? Yeah, because I've studied this and saw that. Just like studies have shown that wood doesn't greatly influence the tone of the guitar, we have to do it. I realize that the sides also don't greatly influence the tone of the acoustic.
The influence ends up being not very significant, right?
The construction, yes. The arrangement of the braces, the struts, that, yes, is important. Yeah, Yima, but now the sides themselves, I'll make out of cardboard.
Ha 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 ha. There you go, folks. Hold him accountable later. Where's the cardboard guitar? You have to hold him accountable.